There are no grateful people who aren't also humble. And if you're finding yourself struggling with gratitude, it's because you think you're owed something.
Mm-hmm.
So it turns out that so much of the life we want to live as Christians is connected to this issue of humility, to the point where, so I just don't know. And I think it's a constant check. We have to constantly check ourselves. It's not about, well, Lewis put it this way. He always says that humility is just thinking about yourself less, not thinking less about yourself. Or thinking, yeah. That's how he would put it. I think he's wrong. Because Scripture says Paul says he's wrong.
Wait, let's get that documented here.
He thinks
Jim Wallace thinks C.S. Lewis is wrong.
I know, right? Well, he's saying that it is about thinking about. It is true that humility is about thinking about yourself less often, but it's also thinking about yourself less highly. We know that from Scripture because Paul tells us we're to think more highly of others than we are of ourselves. So Lewis has got part of it, but not all of it. You have to do both. You have to do stop being so self-absorbed. But also stop thinking that you're the best person in the room. Mm-hmm. You have to think more highly. Now, how do you do that? I think that this is like anything else. I think it's principled. And I had a discussion with a colleague of ours recently about this, is that if love is a decision, could you decide to be desperately in love with your spouse? Could you just decide? Could you stop saying, I'd love him more if, and just get the if out of there? Could you decide, no, I'm deciding to love him more than I could love him any other way? Could you make that a decision? It seems to me there's an aspect of love that is a decision. And if it is, well, could you decide, could you embrace humility in a similar way? I think you probably could. But it'll be a constant struggle. So that's why I told you before we started, I don't do any of these things good in the book. I'm writing the book to me. Mm-hmm. I'm writing the book to say, hey, why am I still struggling with this? And I am. And I'm in my 60s. And I feel like, okay, it's time to, I tell cops this all the time. If you're in your 40s or your 30s, you offer something to an agency that you don't offer when you're a decade older. So when you're young, you're the strongest guy in the room. Probably. I mean, you work to be. Mm-hmm. And you're fast. You can chase guys down, and you don't get tired. If your FTO is 40, there's a difference between you and him. And your 20s, you can outrun him. By the time you're 40, you're already the slowest guy in the room. If you can't shift from physical prowess to wisdom, you got no value at all to your agency, because there's always going to be somebody who's faster now and stronger and can handle that bar fight better than you can. I remember when I was on training, we stopped a guy. We were it's a stolen vehicle. We're pursuing it. He wrecks the car. He jumps out and he runs. And I'm with the training officer. I'm like maybe the 4th month on the job. Off we go. This guy ended up being one of my best friends. So we're running after this guy. So his name is Bob, my training officer. And we jumped the first fence. We're right. I can still see him. I can see him jump the second fence. When we got to the second fence, I looked over at Bob. He's about 20 years older than me. And I said, this guy's getting away, huh? He said, yes, he is. because there was no way to jump another fence for him. And I'm not going to go alone. So you get it. If you can't move at some point toward wisdom. So I think humility is part of a wisdom element, right? So, like we have to have the wisdom to know that I am not the most important thing in the room.
Yeah. So I wonder if I'm just reflecting on what you're saying. I wonder if it's partly direct choice of choosing that thing, and also choosing other things that get you to that thing. So for instance, there is a sense where I could see the good of humility. Like, right, I read your book, I look at the studies, you look at these things and you're like, okay, gosh, that's very convincing. I want that. And however that would look, I want to pursue humility. Maybe it's just starting with my desire. But then there are other things, because we know that we don't have direct choice over everything.
Right.
So for instance, if you said, hey, I want you right now to believe that, there are pink elephants flying around this room.
Right.
I cannot choose to believe that.
Yes.
But there are things. Now, if you were able to show me, like, the evidence that there are pink elephants, and I was able to see, hey, here we have, whatever documentation, and over time, my study of that topic could maybe change my beliefs. I wonder if with humility, it's like that, where there is a kind of a direct path, or maybe a starting point, or whatever, a desiring, but then there are other things that you do directly that have this this effect. So I'm thinking, okay, well, one thing that creates humility, and I think you've already mentioned this, is all right. Let me not just compare myself to other people. Okay, let me look to the standard of all things.
That's right.
That's God. And as I study His nature and character, I go, oh my gosh, here is God. Here I am.
Yeah, right.
Puts my life in proper perspective.
That's right.
And I wasn't pursuing humility per se. I was pursuing God, and then the result was, oh my gosh, I'm humble.
No, you're right. And I think so what I try to do in each chapter too is do this thing called chase the lead, where I'm trying to say, okay, so if you wanted this attribute, how would you get from where you are now to where you want to be? So I try to give you some ideas, and I think it is possible to act your way. You can feel your way into actions or act your way into feelings. And so I think you can do some of this. So for example, one of the things I try to do more now is, am I the kind of person who's comfortable celebrating others? Or am I somebody who just would stay quiet, even when somebody does something really good? Because I have a sense that if I celebrate them, I'm actually judging myself in a way that makes me feel less important. So I think just the act of just saying at every opportunity, celebrate somebody, celebrate others, you can start to move toward the things. Now, you could argue that actually makes me feel good, and that's for selfish reasons. I'm now celebrating others. So you can find a way to mess with any of this.
So that's where you make the distinction between healthy self-interest and selfishness.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, even in the Great Commandment, right? Or the second Great Commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. So there's a proper self-interest.
Okay, so I would say this. I think when I hear that kind of language in Scripture, either from Jesus or from in the Old Testament,
or Paul in Philippians 2,
it's because he's saying, you are such a selfish pig. If you just loved others the way you love yourself, you selfish pig, we'd be okay. See, I hear it that way. Okay. Now, I can be wrong about this, but I just think that, of course, he's going to look, I'm trying to get you to do something that's so against your fallen nature that I'm going to do the one thing you do well is you love yourself. So how about just loving somebody else, but you love yourself, you jerk? That's kind of how I hear it. Okay, so
that's the pessimistic Jesus.
That's the Jim Wallace translation.
That's the Jim Wallace
of the scriptures. But I think you're right though, that this is something that you have to make small. That's a good way of putting it. That you may not be able to. You may, instead of chasing this. Here's what I do know, because doing is so divisive and such a cancer to humility. Trying to earn something. Here's what I do know for sure. No worldview advances this one attribute. The most singularly important attribute to human flourishing is humility. No worldview advances it. Think about it. If you're in a secular worldview, that is, you do the best you can to get what you earn. It's all meritocracy. So I do this, I'm going to get a degree. I do this, I should get the promotion. If I don't get the promotion, you skip me for that guy? He doesn't do anything. We see what we're doing? Any worldview that is about doing develops the opposite of celebrity. Opposite of humility. It develops pride.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting because one of the distinctions that we'll often point to between Christianity and any other world religion is that this is grace-based.
Yes.
Everything else is
works-based.
Right.
So not just secular worldviews, and I don't care which worldview you do, it's true for all theistic and spiritual worldviews except for one. Mm-hmm. So every worldview advances the opposite of this, except for one that says, you know what? And Paul says, this is free. This is a free gift. You cannot earn the highest reward that this system offers. You cannot earn that. It's a free gift. Not of your doing, it says. Why? So that no one can boast. Oh, so I can take the pride out and develop humility. Now, it could just be that it's a coincidence that the one thing that would make you flourish at the highest level happens to be represented in one worldview. Or it could be that this is from the mind of God, who knows you, who designed you, and you were always created to pursue humility. That's how you're going to flourish. And this worldview actually encourages you to do it.